Let's turn our Bibles to Matthew chapter 22. Excuse me. I got that wrong?
Luke 22.
Yeah, I got it wrong. Luke chapter 22. I guess we'll find out which one we're doing here. Luke chapter 22, verse 54. Luke chapter 22, verse 54. Is that right? Am I in the right place?
Yeah.
Having arrested him, that right? I got both written down. I don't know which one. Oh, anyway. Yes, I am right, as always. Luke chapter 22, verse 54. This is the account of Peter that we've been looking at. Having arrested him, they led him away and brought him to the house of the high priest. But Peter was following at a distance. After they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter was sitting among them. And a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the firelight and looking intently at him, said, "This man was with him too." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." A little later, another saw him and said, "You were one of them too." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." After about an hour had passed, another man began to insist, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." Immediately, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had told him, "Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. The first 2 sermons in this extended series, in this part of this extended series, have centered on Peter's response to his personal failure. As you remember, Peter had vowed in the upper room that he would defend Jesus to death, that even if the other disciples deserted Jesus, that Peter would not. He said, "I will fight with you, Lord, till death." Now these other disciples, they may not, but I will defend you to death. That's what Peter had said. And of course, Jesus tried to help Peter back off of his boastful claims, but Peter wouldn't be swayed. He wanted to stick with what he said, and Jesus had told the Apostle Peter, "Peter, you won't stick with me till death. In fact, before the rooster crows tonight, you're going to deny me 3 times." And of course, that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't just a coincidence that as soon as that took place, Peter saw Jesus looking at him. It just burned into his heart the extent of his failure, the magnitude of his failure. And so Peter suddenly has this huge amount of regret in his life. I love those, love's probably, I don't know if that's the right word to use or not. I'm always struck by these last few verses in that text. Verse 60 through 62 says, while he was still speaking, while he was still denying that he knew Jesus, the rooster crowed. And the Lord looked at Peter. And Peter remembered what the Lord said. And of course he went out and he wept bitterly. One of the most interesting things about this situation is that even after Jesus has been crucified and buried and now he's resurrected and he's alive, even the resurrection of Jesus could not unclog this regret, this large amount of regret that was clogging up the spiritual life of the Apostle Peter. That's amazing to me. And I said last week, I'm going to say it again this week just for purposes of illustration. Do you think you'd be excited this morning if Jesus was here? If instead of Paul leading worship, Jesus led the worship? And instead of me preaching the sermon, Jesus was preaching the sermon. Or instead of your Sunday school teacher sitting with you this morning, you think you could be excited about Jesus teaching your Sunday school lesson this morning? Not Peter on this day. That amazes me. He was in the Savior, the Messiah, the Son of God, God in the flesh. But that couldn't unclog this tremendous amount of regret that he had in his life. And so, even after the resurrection of Christ, even after Peter's been in the presence of Christ several times, Peter decides that serving God is not for him. He's going to walk away. And John 21 tells us about this. In verse 1 there it says, "And after these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And he manifested himself in this way. Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus and Nathanael of Cana of Galilee and the sons of Zebedee and 2 other disciples were together." Verse 3, John 21, Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "We will also come with you into the boat." And that night they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, "Children, you do not have any fish, do you?" They answered him, "No, we don't have any fish." So Peter and the disciples and others of the disciples decided they would just go fishing. They just quit serving the Lord, and they did. But it wasn't the same. They used to be professional fishermen. They used to know where to catch fish. They were very successful at catching fish. Now, there's no place for them to go back. Here's where I want to start doing business this morning. For many people, when they have a huge regret in their life, they think to themselves, if I could just get in the right circumstances spiritually, then I'd be able to get over my past and I'd finally be able to move on in life. In an odd sort of way, it's really a cop-out, because what they're doing, in an odd sort of way, is they're blaming everybody else for the circumstance that they find themselves in. And they think that everybody that looks at them remembers this huge failure in their life. But if I could just move to a different town, if people could just forget it, if people wouldn't look at me, and actually, really, they're probably not. Some of them probably are. Many of them are probably not. But they think to themselves, if I could just go somewhere else, if I could start over in a place where no one knows me, no one knows my past, then I would be able to get past this and I'd be able to get on with my life. But actually, that's not true. When we have regret in our life, not just a little bit of regret, when we have a large amount of regret, something has happened, we would like to change it more than anything else in the world, but we can't. I'm not talking about restaurant regret. You know what restaurant regret is? Y'all don't know what restaurant regret is? I've experienced restaurant regret many times. You look on the menu, you order what you think you want, and then they bring the food to the person beside you and you think, I could have had that. That looks so much better than what I ordered. I'm not talking about a restaurant regret here. I'm talking about real life where the rubber hits the road regret. Man, I really messed up. I've cost myself. I've cost someone else. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do to fix it. When we have that kind of regret in our lives, sometimes we think to ourselves, if I could just go someplace else where no one else knows me, then I would be able to get past this thing. I could have my life back. But that's not exactly how things work. In fact, they don't work that way at all. Because here's the truth about that situation. It's not about what other people think about us. It's not about what they might say about us. Really, our problem, even though we want to say that it has to do with other people and what they think and it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with ourselves. and what's inside of us. As much as we don't want to admit that. And when we make things right in our life, when we've gotten to the place where we found forgiveness in Christ, when we've gotten to the place where we've been able to forgive ourselves, and we're able to put that thing in the past, it makes all the difference in the world for us. In Luke chapter 7, we see a wonderful example of what I'm trying to convey to you this morning. In Luke chapter 7, we have a woman who... Turn over to Luke chapter 7. And about midway down to the chapter, you'll see a story of a lady in Luke chapter 7. The Bible just simply says in Luke chapter 7 that she was a known sinner in the community. We don't know exactly what she did from everything that we can ascertain about this passage. It seems as if she was more than likely probably a prostitute. That's what she was. Who knows what kind of circumstances it was that put her in that situation, but because many ladies in the first century found themselves in a similar situation. They had no way to make money. If they lost their husband, they lost their family, they were completely on their own. There were lots of people who found themselves in undesirable positions, and perhaps this lady was one of those people. But we do know this. She was despised in the community, and she was known for her sin in the community. And so she had this huge amount of regret in her life. All of her life, her adult life, she'd been looked at with indignation by those in her community. And then something very wonderful happened in her life. She met Jesus. Somewhere along the way, she met Jesus. And in just an instance, like the woman caught in adultery, you remember that story, do you not? That the Pharisees brought to Jesus. Just like the woman caught in adultery, in just a moment, all of that was washed away by the forgiveness of Jesus. What a wonderful story. I'm told, I think this is very interesting, that if you harmonize the Gospels, if you lay them on top of each other, and you have a chronological timeline of the Gospels, that this situation here with this lady in Luke chapter 7 took place just after Jesus said these words right here. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 and following. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. What? It is very possible, according to people who are much smarter than I am, it is very possible that this dear lady was one of the very first people to respond to those words off the lips of our Savior. Now, many people have responded to those words over many years. We think about this passage of Scripture. We read with great gladness in our heart, and it just warms our heart to read these words from Jesus, because we've all been to that place where we're weary and we're tired, and we go to those words of Jesus. Come unto me, all who are weary and are heavy laden. I will give you rest. There's no rest like the rest that we find in Jesus. It's very possible that this dear lady was the very first one who responded to those words. And when she found that forgiveness in Jesus, all of her past just melted away. All of her life, her adult life, I keep saying it, all of her adult life probably, she's hidden in the shadows. But in just an instant, at the feet of Jesus, at the words of Jesus, all of that melted away, And now she was no longer having to hide in the dark. And Luke chapter 7 gives us a wonderful view into the life of this, the new life of this lady. I want you to turn your Bibles, or you can look on the screen, to Luke chapter 7, verse 36 through 38. This is one of my favorite passages of scriptures in all of the Bible. It says, now one of the Pharisees was requesting him, verse 36, Luke chapter 7, verse 36. Now one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him. And he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. And when she learned that Jesus was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and kept wiping them with the hair of her head, and kissing his feet, and anointing them with perfume. She didn't care. She knew what everybody was going to think about her. And they did. If you read on in this passage, you see the thoughts and the words of the Pharisees who were saying, now if this man were a prophet, he would know what sort of woman this was who was touching him. Well, they're right about that. He did know. But he didn't care. And when Jesus touched her, she didn't care either. I wrote a song about this passage of scripture several years ago called She Met the Master in Jerusalem that day. She found the rose of Sharon in the dust along the way. It didn't matter what they might think or they might say. She met the Master in Jerusalem that day. For the first time in a long time, she was finally free. Some people think to themselves, if I could just move to a different place, if I could get a different job, if I could get a different marriage, if I could move to a different... But that's not the answer to our problem. The answer to regret and failures in our life is finding ourselves at the feet of Jesus. And finding that forgiveness that only Jesus can give. And here's the good news, and we'll get to this next week. Jesus is seeking you out. He seeks me out. When I've fallen, when I've failed, Jesus is the one who seeks us out. He doesn't wait for us to come to him. He seeks for us, and he goes where we are. And he speaks to us, and he calls us to himself, just like he did the disciples on the shore that morning when they had decided to walk away from Jesus. Jesus went to where they were, and he called out to them. This is where we'll pick up next week. You didn't find any fish, did you guys? And we'll get into this next week. You know why? Because there aren't any fish out there for Christians. If you are God's child, you can run and hide, you can search and seek, you can do all that you want to, but if you are God's child, you will never be satisfied until you get those issues in your life resolved at the feet of Jesus. You will never be satisfied. That's the bad news. The good news is this. It's at the feet of Jesus. You can find all of the forgiveness that you thought you would never experience again. All of the joy and all of the peace that you thought was gone for a lifetime. You can find again. Because Jesus came not only to redeem us in eternity, he came to redeem our life right now. Listen to these words. Let's Paul sing this song for us.
to call upon your name. All my life I've been a sinner, and that I am ashamed. But I heard that you would listen, so I'm giving you my plea. I'm too unworthy, Lord, to come to you. Could you please come down to me? I know that there are others who can offer more than I promise you I'd understand if for me you had no time. I think I just hit bottom, and I'm looking up to see. I'm too unworthy, Lord, to come to you. Could you please come down to me? I guess I must be reaping from the seeds that I have sown.